Millionaire CEO sees triplets crying in front of his wife's grave. They say 3 words and he cries. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. This is a journey that will touch your heart in ways you never expected. Enjoy the story. The 47th floor of Sullivan Technologies tower hummed with the kind of energy that only $12 billion could generate. Preston Sullivan sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, his steel-gray eyes scanning quarterly reports while 14 executives waited for his verdict on their latest acquisition proposal. Hartwell Industries. Preston's voice cut through the silence like a blade. 87 million. Make it happen by Friday. No emotion, no hesitation. Just the cold, calculated precision that had built his empire from a garage startup into a tech giant valued at $12 billion. At 48, Preston Sullivan was the kind of man who made Fortune 500 CEOs lose sleep, who could shift entire markets with a single decision. But it wasn't always like this. The memory hit him unexpectedly, as it always did. Elena, laughing, in their first small apartment, flower in her auburn hair as she attempted to bake his birthday cake. "You know, Preston," she'd said, those green eyes sparkling with mischief, "success isn't measured by the size of your bank account. It's measured by how many hearts you touch along the way." He'd kissed the flower off her nose and promised he'd never forget that. That was 18 years ago, when love seemed infinite and the future stretched before them like an endless summer day. "Sir?" Marcus Webb, his CFO, was staring at him expectantly. "The Henderson merger?" Preston blinked, returning to the present, his expression hardening again. "Approved. Next item." The meeting continued for another hour. Each decision worth millions, each choice affecting thousands of lives. Preston handled it all with the emotional engagement of a chess master moving pieces across a board. When the executives finally filed out, he was alone again in his glass-walled office, 53 floors above Chicago's bustling streets. His phone buzzed. Personal line. Only 3 people had that number and 2 of them were dead. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Dr. Elizabeth Hayes from Chicago General Hospital. I need to speak with you about your wife, Elena Sullivan." Time stopped. The city below seemed to freeze. The building's hum disappeared. Preston's hand gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles went white. "There's been an accident, sir. A collision on Lakeshore Drive. Your wife was rushed into emergency surgery." But the doctor's voice became gentle, careful. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sullivan. We did everything we could." The phone slipped from Preston's hand, clattering loudly on the marble floor. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago continued its relentless pace. Cars moving like blood cells through arterial streets. People hurrying with their small, urgent purposes. But in that office, in that moment, Preston Sullivan's world simply stopped. Elena was gone. The woman who'd kept him grounded when success threatened to consume his soul. The photographer who saw beauty in broken things and convinced him that vulnerability was strength, not weakness. The only person who could make him laugh until his ribs hurt and cry without shame at old movies. Gone. Today marked exactly 2 years since that call. 2 years since Preston Sullivan learned that some losses are so profound they change the very chemistry of your soul. And tonight, for the first time since Elena's funeral, he was going to visit her grave. What Preston didn't know was that tomorrow would bring the first ray of light into his endless night. He didn't know that sometimes salvation comes in the smallest packages, with the most unexpected words, when you least expect it, and most desperately need it. The drive to Oak Hill Cemetery took 37 minutes through Chicago's gray March. Drizzle. Preston's hands trembled slightly as he parked beside the familiar iron gates. He'd only been here once since the funeral, the day they installed the headstone. Elena Marie Sullivan, beloved wife. She saw beauty in broken things. The words he'd chosen seemed inadequate now, facing the polished marble that marked where his heart was buried. Pink roses, her favorites, lay fresh beside the stone. He'd arranged for weekly deliveries, though he'd never witnessed their placement. "Hello, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice thick with tenderness he hadn't spoken aloud in 730 days. The cemetery was empty except for a maintenance worker in the distance. No photographers, no board members, no one to witness Preston Sullivan's carefully constructed facade finally crumble. I don't know how to do this without you, Elena. The words came rushing out, desperate and broken. I don't know how to be human without you showing me the way. His knees gave way and he sank into the wet grass, his expensive suit forgotten. For the first time since that terrible phone call, Preston Sullivan wept. Not the controlled tears of a public figure, but the raw, devastating sobs of a man who'd lost his anchor in the storm. Everyone thinks I'm stronger now, he gasped between breaths. But I'm disappearing, Elena. Every day I become less of the man you loved. I don't know how to stop it. The rain began falling harder, mixing with his tears, washing away a year of accumulated numbness. In that moment, surrounded by silence and memory, Preston realized he was drowning. Not in water, but in his own inability to feel anything beyond loss. That's when he heard them. Soft footsteps on wet grass, hushed whispers carried by the evening breeze. Aunt Elena would have loved these, said a small voice filled with sincerity. Preston turned and saw 3 identical girls, perhaps 7 years old, approaching a grave 3 rows away. Each carried tiny bouquets of wildflowers, dandelions, clovers, and miniature daisies that looked like they'd been picked from roadside meadows. Their dark curls were damp from rain, and they wore matching yellow raincoats that seemed too big for their small frames. Triplets, Harper, Madison, and Skylar, though he couldn't tell which was which from this distance. Mommy said Aunt Elena is watching us from heaven, whispered one triplet, carefully placing her flowers on a weathered headstone. Do you think she can see these? Asked another. I think she sees everything, replied the third with the absolute certainty that only children possess. Preston should have left, should have given them privacy for their moment with their grandmother, but something kept him frozen in place watching these 3 little girls tend to their grief with such gentle acceptance. Then one of them noticed him. That man looks very sad, she whispered to her sisters, pointing at Preston with childhood's uninhibited frankness. The other triplets studied him with serious brown eyes. Very, very sad. They exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes, as triplets often do. Then, with determination that caught Preston completely off guard, they walked toward him. Are you visiting someone you love? Asked the first triplet, stopping at a respectful distance. Preston's throat tightened. Yes, my wife. We're visiting our Aunt Elena, explained the second triplet. She died 2 years ago, but Mommy says love doesn't die even when people do. Preston's world tilted. On its axis, he stared at the 3 innocent faces, his heart pounding with impossible recognition. You're Aunt Elena? He managed to whisper. The third triplet stepped forward and pointed directly at Elena's marble headstone. Our dear Aunt Elena, she used to call us every Sunday and send the most beautiful presents. She promised to visit us before. The little girl's voice trailed off, but her eyes remained fixed on Elena's grave with unmistakable love. Preston felt the earth shift beneath him. Elena had never mentioned nieces, never spoken of siblings, never. Girls Harper, Madison, Skylar. A woman's voice called from the parking lot, filled with panic. The triplets turned as a young woman with auburn hair, Elena's hair, came running. Toward them, her face flushed with embarrassment and something that looked like fear. I'm so sorry, she said breathlessly, reaching for the girls. We didn't mean to disturb you. Come on, girls, we need to go. But Preston couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't process what he'd just heard. Elena had a sister, Elena had nieces, and somehow he'd never known they existed. Preston couldn't sleep. The triplets' words echoed in his mind. Our dear Aunt Elena. How was it possible? Elena had told him she was an only child, orphaned at 16 with no living relatives. By 6 a.m., he was on the phone with Marcus Chen, the most discreet private investigator in Chicago. I need you to find everything about a woman named. Preston paused, realizing he didn't even know the mother's name. A woman with 3 daughters. Triplets. about 7 years old. Auburn hair. Saw them at Oak Hill Cemetery yesterday evening. Give me 24 hours, Marcus replied. Preston spent the day in his office mechanically conducting meetings while his mind raced with questions. Had Elena lied to him? Why would she hide family? What else didn't he know about the woman he'd loved for 20 years? The call came at 7 p.m. sharp. Her name is Autumn Riley, 29 years old, Marcus reported. The triplets are Harper, Madison, and Skylar Riley. And Preston, she's Elena's younger sister. Preston's hand tightened on the phone. That's impossible. Elena said they were separated after their parents died in a car crash when Elena was 18 and Autumn was 11. Elena aged out of foster care, but Autumn was adopted by the Riley family in Ohio. They reconnected when Autumn turned 18. The room spun around Preston. Elena had a sister. For 11 years of their marriage, Elena had a sister. There's more, Marcus continued. Elena sent Autumn money regularly, always from a personal account you probably never monitored. I found years of transfer records, $500 every month, plus extra for holidays, school clothes, medical bills. Preston sank into his chair. Elena had been supporting her sister's family while he'd been completely oblivious. Autumn moved to Chicago 3 years ago to be closer to Elena. She's a registered nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, but Marcus paused. Preston, she's currently on medical leave. Early-stage breast cancer. Started treatment 6 months ago. The words hit Preston like physical blows. Treatment? Is she... Prognosis is good with proper care, but she's struggling, financially. Working from home doing medical transcription to pay bills. The triplets think their Aunt Elena just went on a long trip. Autumn never told them she died. Preston closed his eyes, pieces falling into horrifying place. Elena had been secretly caring for her sister and 3 nieces. She'd carried this responsibility, this love, this worry, all while never breathing a word to him. The triplets knew Elena through weekly video calls. Marcus continued. Elena sent them birthday presents, Christmas gifts, even helped pay for their school supplies. To them, she was the magical aunt who lived in the big city and promised to visit someday. Why didn't Elena tell me? Preston whispered. I can only speculate, but based on the pattern, Elena was protecting them. Financial records show she increased support payments whenever your business faced difficulties. Maybe she was afraid that if you knew during tough times. Preston understood. Elena had protected her sister's family the only way she knew how, by keeping them separate from his world of corporate volatility and ruthless decisions. Where do they live? Small apartment in Lincoln Park. Autumn's exhausted her savings on medical bills. She's 3 months behind on rent. Preston hung up and stared out at the Chicago skyline. Elena had carried this secret for 11 years, loving and supporting a family he never knew existed. She'd built relationships, created bonds, made promises to 3 little girls who called her Aunt Elena, and waited for visits that would never come. The triplets didn't even know she was dead. Tomorrow, Preston Sullivan would drive to Lincoln Park and meet the family his wife had loved in secret. He would look into the eyes of Elena's sister and try to understand why the woman he thought he knew completely had kept the most important part of her heart hidden from him. But tonight, he would grieve not just for Elena, but for the years of love and connection he'd been denied, and for 3 little girls who were still waiting for their aunt to come home. The Lincoln Park apartment building was nothing like Preston's world. Peeling paint, narrow hallways that smelled of old cooking and broken dreams. Unit 4B had a cheerful, welcome mat that looked worn but loved. Preston stood outside the door for 5 minutes, rehearsing words that seemed impossible to say. How do you explain to a dying woman that her sister's widower just discovered she existed? He knocked softly. The door opened to reveal Elena's face. Older, thinner, marked by illness. But unmistakably, Elena's green eyes and auburn hair. Autumn. Riley wore a faded nursing uniform and a headscarf that couldn't quite hide her hair loss. Can I help you? She asked, voice cautious. My name is Preston Sullivan. I was married to Elena. Autumn's face went white. She gripped the doorframe for support. Elena's husband, oh God, she talked about you all the time. May I come in? Autumn nodded, stepping aside with obvious weakness. The small apartment was spotless but sparse. Medical bills covered, a tiny kitchen table where she'd been working on a laptop, transcribing doctor's notes for pennies per page. Uncle Preston! 3 voices shrieked in unison. The triplets came running from their shared bedroom, faces lighting up like Christmas morning. They threw themselves at Preston with the fearless affection of children who'd heard stories about someone special. Aunt Elena showed us your picture, Harper explained, bouncing on her toes. She said you were the smartest man in the whole world, Madison added, and that you make computers think. Schuyler finished, grabbing his hand. Preston knelt to their level, overwhelmed. These children knew him. Elena had shared their life together with her secret family. Girls, let Mr. Sullivan sit down, Autumn said softly, moving slowly to the couch. Preston could see the exhaustion in every movement, the way she favored her left side where chemo ports probably lived under her clothes. They don't know, Autumn whispered when the girls went to get him a drawing they'd made. About Elena. I couldn't. How do you tell 3 7-year-olds that the aunt they love is never coming to visit? Preston's throat tightened. When did you last speak to her? The day before she died. She was so excited about surprising you for your anniversary. She'd been planning it for months. Tears slipped down Autumn's thin cheeks. I keep waiting for her Sunday call. The girls keep asking when Aunt Elena is coming. The triplets returned with a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. It's you and Aunt Elena and us, they announced proudly. Preston stared at the innocent artwork, seeing Elena's influence in every loving detail she'd shared about him with these children. Autumn, he said carefully, I want to help. Medical bills, rent, whatever you need. I can't accept charity, she replied, pride flickering in her tired eyes. It's not charity. Elena was supporting you. I should have been doing it all along. Autumn studied his face, searching for something. Why didn't she tell you about us? Preston considered lying, protecting Elena's memory, but these weren't Elena's secrets anymore. I think she was protecting you from my world. Business can be brutal, unpredictable. Elena kept you safe the only way she knew how. Uncle Preston. Schuyler climbed into his lap with startling trust. Are you going to stay for dinner? Mommy makes really good grilled cheese. Looking into 3 hopeful faces, Preston Sullivan felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years. The desperate desire to protect someone other than himself. I'd love to stay, he said, and meant it more than any business deal he'd ever closed. Preston found himself at the Riley apartment every evening after work, trading his corner office for a kitchen table covered in homework and medical bills. What started as obligatory visits became the highlight of his days. Uncle Preston, you're doing it wrong. Harper giggled, watching him attempt to help with 2nd-grade math. Mrs. Peterson taught us a different way. Show me, Preston said, genuinely interested. When was the last time he'd admitted he didn't know something? The triplets took turns teaching him their methods, their patience infinite with this important grown-up who actually listened. Madison showed him how to make paper airplanes that actually flew. Schuyler taught him the proper way to braid doll hair. Harper explained why peanut butter belonged with marshmallows, not jelly. Autumn watched from the couch, too weak some days to stand for long, but smiling at interactions that brought life back to her exhausted daughters. They're different when you're here, she told Preston one evening after the girls had gone to bed. Lighter. They've been carrying worry about me, trying to be little adults. With you, they remember how to be children. Preston was learning too. How to read bedtime stories with proper character voices. How grilled cheese could taste better than 5-star restaurant meals when shared with people who mattered. How 3 small girls could make him laugh harder than any corporate victory ever had. Tell us about Aunt Elena when she was little, Schuyler demanded during their nightly story time. She wasn't little when I met her, Preston admitted. But she told me stories. He found himself sharing Elena through the triplets' memories, seeing his wife through their innocent eyes. Elena, who sent birthday videos singing off-key. Elena, who remembered every loose tooth and first day of school. Elena, who promised to take them to Disney World when Uncle Preston could come too. She talked about you all the time, Madison said. Seriously. She said you worked too much but had the kindest heart in the whole world. She said that? She said you just forgot sometimes, but hearts don't really forget. They just get scared. Harper added with 7-year-old wisdom that cut straight through Preston's defenses. On Friday, Preston arrived to find Autumn collapsed. At the kitchen table, paperwork scattered around her laptop. The insurance company denied coverage for next month's treatment, she whispered, tears streaming down her pale face. I don't know what to do. The girls need me, but I can't afford. Preston knelt beside her chair. Autumn, look at me. You're not doing this alone anymore. I can't let you pay my medical bills. You're not letting me do anything. Elena would have handled this. I'm just continuing what she started. That weekend, Preston made phone calls that had nothing to do with business acquisitions. Private oncologists, insurance appeals, experimental treatments. For the first time in years, his wealth felt purposeful. Monday morning brought a breakthrough. Autumn's treatment was fully covered through a medical grant Preston had quietly established. The triplets bounced around their apartment celebrating that Mommy's medicine was free now. Uncle Preston fixed it, they announced to everyone who'd listen. But Preston was learning that some things couldn't be fixed with money, like the way Madison had nightmares about losing her mother. How Harper hoarded food in her backpack just in case. How Skylar asked every night if he was coming back tomorrow. These weren't problems he could solve with acquisitions or hostile takeovers. These required presence, patience, and something Preston had forgotten he possessed. An endless capacity to love. You know, Autumn said one evening, watching him help with bath time. Elena used to say you'd make an amazing father someday. Preston paused, Madison's small hand trusting in his as he helped her from the tub. She was right, Autumn continued softly. You just needed the right children to show you how. Victor Kane had been watching Preston Sullivan for 3 weeks and he didn't like what he saw. The man who'd built Sullivan Technologies through ruthless precision was leaving meetings early, declining profitable acquisitions and making decisions that prioritized ethical considerations over bottom lines. The Brennan Industries deal alone would net us $400 million, Victor said during their Tuesday strategy meeting, his voice carefully controlled. Yet you're rejecting it because of potential job losses? Preston didn't look up from the contract. He was reviewing. 45,000 families losing their income isn't acceptable collateral damage, Victor. Victor exchanged glances with other board members. 3 months ago, Preston would have signed that deal without blinking. Now he was concerned about feelings. Preston, might I suggest you're letting personal circumstances cloud your business judgment? Victor's tone carried just enough concern to sound caring while planting doubt. My judgment is fine. Find me deals that create jobs, not eliminate them. After Preston left early, again to help with homework, Victor lingered in the conference room with Patricia Hayes and Thomas Crawford, 2 senior board members. Gentlemen, I'm concerned, Victor began, his voice heavy with false worry. Preston's been different since he became involved with this teacher and her children. Different how? Patricia asked, though her frown suggested she'd noticed too. Emotionally compromised. He's rejected 6 major acquisitions this quarter, citing humanitarian concerns. Our stock price is stagnating because investors see uncertainty in leadership. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Victor, Preston's personal life isn't our business. It is when it affects company performance, Victor replied smoothly. Last week he left during the Hartwell negotiation to attend a school play. A school play? Thomas. We lost a $200 million opportunity because our CEO prioritized children's theater. What Victor didn't mention was that Preston had closed 3 innovative deals the same week. Partnerships with education technology companies that promised steady, ethical growth. Victor preferred the old Preston, predictable, brutal, focused, solely on profit. Meanwhile, Preston's phone buzzed with a text from Harper. Uncle Preston, I got an A on my spelling test. Mommy says you helped me study the best words. For the first time all day, Preston smiled genuinely. That evening, Preston sat in Autumn's small kitchen, helping Skylar with math while Madison practiced reading. Aloud, and Harper drew pictures of their family. Autumn was having a good day, strong enough to make spaghetti and laugh at Preston's terrible attempts to twirl noodles properly. "Uncle Preston?" Madison asked, looking up from her book. "Why? Do you look sad sometimes when your phone rings?" Preston paused, realizing he'd been frowning at work messages. Sometimes adults have to deal with people who don't understand what's really important. "What's really important?" Skylar asked, abandoning her math worksheet. Preston looked around the cramped apartment, at medical bills sorted into piles, at 3 girls who'd made him remember how to feel joy, at a woman who was teaching him that strength came in forms he'd never recognized. "This," he said simply. "Being here with you." Later, as he drove home to his empty mansion, Preston's phone rang. Victor Kane. "Preston, we need to discuss your recent decisions. The board has concerns about your stability. Perhaps you should consider a medical evaluation just to reassure investors." Preston's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Victor, my personal and professional decisions are mine to make." "Of course, but when those decisions affect shareholder value, the board has responsibilities. Think about it, Preston, for everyone's sake." The line went dead, leaving Preston with the distinct feeling that Victor Kane was no longer his business partner. Victor was positioning himself as Preston's replacement. But as Preston thought about Harper's proud smile over her spelling test, Madison's trust when she asked him to check for monsters under her bed, and Skylar's certainty that he would always come back tomorrow, he realized something had fundamentally changed. For the first time in his career, Preston Sullivan cared more about being a good man than being a successful one, and that apparently made him dangerous. Autumn collapsed during her Thursday treatment. Preston received the call while reviewing quarterly reports, but within minutes he was racing toward St. Mary's Hospital, his heart pounding with a fear he hadn't felt since Elena's accident. He found the triplets in the pediatric waiting room, small and scared, clutching hands while a nurse tried to comfort them. Their neighbor, Mrs. Chen, looked overwhelmed trying to manage 3 frightened children. "Uncle Preston." They launched themselves at him with desperate relief. "Mommy got really sick," Madison whispered against his chest. "The doctor said her body is fighting extra hard right now." Dr. Sarah Martinez explained that Autumn's immune system was severely compromised. "The chemo is working, but she needs complete rest. No stress, no responsibilities, at least 2 weeks of recovery." "She can't be alone with the girls," the doctor continued. "She's too weak to care for them safely." Mrs. Chen shifted uncomfortably. "I wish I could help more, but with my husband's hip surgery..." Preston didn't hesitate. "They're coming home with me." "Uncle Preston, we can't leave Mommy." Harper protested. "We're not leaving her. We're all staying together." That evening, Preston's mansion received its first real inhabitants in 2 years. The triplets stood in the marble foyer, eyes wide with amazement at the chandeliers and sweeping staircase. "It's like a castle," Skylar breathed. Autumn, pale but insistent on walking, looked around the opulent space with obvious discomfort. "Preston, this is too much. We can't stay here." "Yes, you can. You need to focus on getting better, not worrying about rent or groceries or whether the girls are safe." Preston's voice was gentle but firm. Elena would have insisted. The first week was chaos. Preston learned that 7-year-olds could turn a quiet mansion into a symphony of life. Laughter echoed through halls that had known only silence. Tiny handprints appeared on windows. Drawings covered his previously pristine refrigerator. Preston threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he'd once applied to hostile takeovers. He mastered pancake shapes for Saturday breakfast, Mickey Mouse heads for Madison, butterflies for Harper, rockets for Skylar. He learned the precise water temperature for baths and the specific order of bedtime stories. "You're different here," Autumn observed one evening, watching Preston patiently help Madison with a puzzle while Harper braided his hair and Skylar read aloud from her favorite book. "Different how?" "Softer. Like Elena always said you were underneath. All that business armor." Their eyes met across the room, and Preston felt something shift between them, not the desperate grief bond that had brought them together, but something warmer, more dangerous. Autumn was getting stronger daily, color returning to her cheeks, energy rebuilding. But she was also becoming more beautiful to Preston. Not despite her illness, but because of the grace with which she carried it. "Preston," she said softly after the girls were asleep, "I need to ask you something difficult." They sat in his study, the fire casting warm light across Elena's photographs that still adorned the walls. "Are you doing this because you feel guilty about Elena keeping a secret? Because if this is some kind of penance—" "No," Preston interrupted, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "I'm doing this because I can't imagine my life without you and the girls in it anymore." Autumn's breath caught. "Preston, I know it's complicated, I know it's too soon, maybe inappropriate, but Autumn, you've brought something back to life in me that I thought died with Elena. I feel it too," she whispered. "And that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I'm falling in love with my dead sister's husband, and I don't know if that makes me the worst person in the world or just incredibly lucky." Preston moved closer, taking her hand. "Elena loved you. She protected you. She wanted you happy. How can you be sure?" Preston smiled, thinking of 3 little girls who'd appeared at exactly the right moment to save him from drowning in grief. "Because she sent me to you." Preston woke to the sound of whispered conspiracies in the hallway outside his bedroom, 3 little voices planning something with the seriousness of military strategists. "But what if Uncle Preston doesn't like flowers?" Madison worried. "Everybody likes flowers," Harper replied with authority. "And Mommy's favorite are the yellow ones by the fountain. We need to make them have a special dinner, just the 2 of them," Skylar added. "Like in the movies where people get married." Preston smiled, realizing the triplets had appointed themselves matchmakers. Over the past month, they'd been orchestrating moments, asking Preston to help Mommy reach something high, suggesting he and Autumn share dessert, because there's only one piece left, insisting they all needed family movie nights cuddled together on the couch. At breakfast, the girls unveiled their latest scheme. "Uncle Preston, Mommy needs to see your office," Harper announced, "for work reasons." "Work reasons?" Autumn laughed, color high in her cheeks. She'd been beautiful when sick, but healthy Autumn was breathtaking. "Very important work reasons," Madison confirmed solemnly. "Show her the big window where you can see the whole world." That afternoon, Preston found himself giving Autumn a private tour of Sullivan Technologies Tower. In his office, she stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, marveling at the city spread below. "Elena used to describe this view," she said softly. "She said you could see everything from up here except what really mattered." "What did she mean?" "That you couldn't see people's hearts from 47 floors up. You couldn't see love or kindness, or the small moments that actually make life beautiful." Preston moved beside her, close enough to catch her scent, something clean and warm that had nothing to do with expensive perfumes. "I can see those things now," he said quietly. "The girls taught me how to look differently." "Preston." Autumn turned to face him, and the space between them seemed electric. "I need to tell you something that's been keeping me awake." "What?" "I've been thinking about Elena's letters, the ones she wrote me over the years. She used to describe you so vividly, your laugh, your kindness when you thought no one was watching, the way you made her feel safe." Autumn's voice trembled slightly. "And I keep thinking, this is wrong. I shouldn't know these intimate things about you. I shouldn't be living in your house depending on you, feeling what? Things I have no right to feel." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I'm falling in love with you, Preston, and I don't know if I'm betraying Elena or honoring her memory or just being selfish because you make me feel precious in a way I'd forgotten was possible." Preston cupped her face gently. "Autumn, look at me. Elena spent 11 years protecting you, loving you, preparing you for something. What if that something was this? What if she knew you'd need someone to take care of you and the girls? That's crazy. Is it? 3 little girls show up at Elena's grave at the exact moment I'm breaking apart. They know things about me, trust me instantly, call me Uncle Preston, like they've been waiting their whole lives to meet me." Preston's voice grew stronger. "Elena always believed in signs, in destiny. Maybe we are hers." I'm scared, Autumn whispered. Of what? Of loving you so much that I forget how to protect myself. Of the girls getting attached and you changing your mind. Of people saying I'm using you or you're replacing Elena with someone convenient. Preston stepped closer. Are you using me? No. Am I trying to replace Elena with you? I don't think so. Then we're two people who found something real in the middle of something tragic. Elena would want us to be happy, Autumn. She'd want the girls to have a father and you to have someone who sees how extraordinary you are. Autumn searched his eyes. How can you be so sure? Because she loved us both. And love doesn't end with death. It just changes form. Maybe it becomes the courage to love again. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and fear and hope. Preston, Autumn said finally, if we do this, if we try to build something, together, promise me it won't be about guilt or obligation or filling Elena's place. It won't be. This is about you, Autumn Riley. About the woman who raised 3 incredible daughters while fighting for her life. About someone who taught me that strength doesn't look like what I thought it did. And if I promise you the same, that this isn't about gratitude or security or finding the girls a father figure, then maybe we have something worth fighting for. Their first kiss tasted like tears and hope, and the beginning of something neither had expected to find. Preston called an emergency board meeting for Friday morning, but this time the agenda had nothing to do with acquisitions or quarterly earnings. He stood at the head of the conference table, looking at faces that had grown increasingly skeptical of his leadership over the past 3 months. I'm announcing the creation of the Elena Sullivan Foundation, Preston began, clicking to his first slide. Initial funding, $500 million. The room erupted in murmurs. Victor Kane's face went white then red. The foundation will focus on supporting single mothers with serious medical conditions, providing childcare, medical coverage, and educational resources for their children. Preston, Patricia Hayes interrupted carefully. $500 million is substantial. What's the business rationale? There isn't one. This is about legacy, not profit. Victor leaned forward, his voice tight with controlled anger. You're talking about giving away a significant portion of company assets for a personal project. I'm talking about using my personal wealth to honor my wife's memory and support families like the one she protected in secret. Preston's voice carried quiet authority. Furthermore, I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. Janet Chen will assume CEO responsibilities while I focus on the foundation and strategic oversight. The silence was deafening. Janet Chen, a brilliant Stanford MBA who'd impressed Preston with her ethical leadership style, looked as surprised as everyone else. Sir, I'm honored, but this is incredibly sudden, Janet managed. It's not sudden, it's overdue. This company needs leadership that sees beyond quarterly profits to sustainable impact. Victor stood abruptly. Preston, I need to speak with you privately. Anything you have to say can be said here. Fine. Victor's composure cracked completely. You're destroying everything we built, rejecting profitable deals, giving away millions, promoting someone with 5 years' experience over senior partners who've earned their positions. Senior partners like you? I've been your right hand for 15 years. I've made you billions, and now you're throwing it away for some fantasy of domestic happiness with a gold-digging nurse and her children. The room went deadly quiet. Preston's expression became ice cold, the same look that had intimidated Fortune 500 CEOs for decades. Careful, Victor. Autumn Riley is worth more than this entire company. If you suggest otherwise again, you won't have a position to complain about. Victor's face flushed darker. This is insanity. The board won't stand for this emotional instability. The board, Preston said calmly, will adapt to new leadership, or they'll find new positions elsewhere. After the meeting, Preston drove straight to the mansion, where he found Autumn helping the triplets with art projects in the sunroom. Crayon drawings covered every surface, pictures of their new family, with stick figures labeled Daddy Preston, Mommy, and 3 smiling girls. How did it go? Autumn asked, noting his expression. Victor's going to be a problem, but that's not why I'm here. Preston knelt beside the art table. Girls, I need to ask you something very important. Three faces turned to him with absolute attention. How would you feel if I asked your mom to marry me? The explosion of excitement was immediate. Harper launched herself into his arms. Madison started jumping, and Skylar clapped so hard her hands must have hurt. Does that mean you'll be our real daddy? Madison asked breathlessly. I'm already your real daddy in every way that matters. This would just make it official. That evening, Preston took Autumn to Elena's grave. The triplets insisted on coming, carrying flowers they'd picked from the mansion's garden. Elena, Preston said softly, kneeling beside the familiar headstone. I want to ask your permission for something. Autumn's eyes filled with tears as Preston produced a simple platinum ring, not the elaborate diamond he'd given Elena, but something clean and modern, and entirely suited to Autumn's practical beauty. Autumn Riley, Preston said, his voice strong and clear. You brought me back to life when I thought I'd never feel whole again. You taught me that love multiplies when it's shared, that family isn't just about blood, and that the best parts of Elena live on in the love we give each other. Preston, Autumn whispered, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life being worthy of you and these incredible girls? Through her tears, Autumn nodded. Yes. Yes, absolutely yes. As Preston slipped the ring onto her finger, he felt Elena's presence like a warm breeze, not saying goodbye, but giving them her blessing for a love that honored her memory by embracing life again. The triplets cheered, already planning their dresses and flowers and whether they could have 2 cakes at the wedding. But 60 miles away, Victor Kane was making phone calls to board members, planting seeds of doubt about Preston's mental stability, and drafting a plan to seize control of Sullivan Technologies before his former partner could destroy everything they'd built. Victor Kane had been planning his coup for 3 weeks, ever since Preston's disastrous board meeting. The man who'd built Sullivan Technologies into a $12 billion empire was now playing house with a nurse and her children, making decisions, with his heart instead of his head. Gentlemen, Victor addressed the private gathering in his penthouse office. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. Preston Sullivan is no longer mentally competent to lead this company. The 5 board members present shifted uncomfortably. Patricia Hayes spoke first. Victor, these are serious accusations. Look at the evidence, Victor replied, sliding manila folders across his mahogany table. He's rejected 8 major acquisitions worth over $2 billion in profits. He's donated $500 million to a vanity project. And he's handed operational control to Janet Chen based on what? Her smile? Board member Thomas Crawford flipped through the psychological profile Victor had commissioned. This seems invasive. Protecting a $14 billion company from an unstable CEO isn't invasive. It's essential, Victor replied coldly. Look at the facts. He's exhibiting classic symptoms of complicated grief disorder, leading to impaired judgment and potentially dangerous decision-making. What Victor didn't mention were the innovative partnerships Preston had closed the same week, collaborations with educational technology companies that promised steady, sustainable growth. Victor preferred the old Preston, predictable, ruthless, focused solely on maximizing quarterly returns. He's becoming emotionally compromised by his relationship with this teacher, Victor continued. Sources suggest he's being manipulated by a woman who targeted him specifically for his wealth. The next morning, Chicago's financial press exploded with carefully leaked information. The Wall Street Journal ran a devastating piece. Sullivan, technology CEO's mental health crisis threatens company stability. Anonymous sources detailed Preston's erratic behavior and emotional instability following his wife's death. The article painted a picture of a brilliant businessman undone by grief and manipulated by opportunistic outsiders. But Victor wasn't finished. By afternoon, gossip websites picked up a more salacious angle. Billionaire's midlife crisis tech. Mogul's inappropriate relationship with young nurse raises questions. The stories portrayed Autumn as a gold digger manipulating a grieving widower, complete with carefully cropped photos that made innocent family moments look suspicious. The triplets were described as tools in their mother's calculated scheme to snare a billionaire. At Lincoln Elementary School, the impact was immediate and cruel. "My mom says your mom is a bad woman who tricks rich men," Jessica Martinez announced loudly during recess. While other children gathered to listen, Harper's face crumpled. "That's not true. Mommy is good." "Then why is she dating that old man? For money?" another child taunted. Skylar stepped protectively in front of her sister. "Daddy Preston isn't old. He's our friend." "He's using you to get to your mom," Jessica continued, emboldened by the crowd. "My dad says it's gross." The triplets came home in tears, unable to understand why their classmates had suddenly turned cruel about the man who'd brought such joy to their lives. Autumn found Preston in his home office that evening, staring at the latest headlines spread across his desk. "The girls were bullied today," she said quietly, sitting across from him. "About us, about you." Preston's jaw tightened. "Autumn, I'm sorry. I never wanted—" "I know." She was quiet for a long moment. "Preston, maybe we should step back until this passes. You want me to stay away?" The pain in his voice was unmistakable. "I want to protect my daughters. They don't understand why people are saying cruel things about someone they love." Preston felt his world tilting. Just when he'd found something worth living for, the vultures were circling, ready to destroy everything. "The board is meeting tomorrow," he said quietly. "Victor's trying to have me declared mentally incapable." Autumn reached across the desk, taking his hand. "What are you going to do?" Preston looked at their joined hands, thinking about everything he could lose. His company, his legacy, and now possibly the family that had brought him back to life. "I'll fight," he said simply. "But Autumn, I won't sacrifice your peace for my pride. If staying away is what's best for Harper, Madison, and Skylar, don't you dare give up on us," she interrupted fiercely. "Not when we've all finally found something real." But as Preston prepared for the battle that would determine his future, he knew Victor Kane had chosen his weapons well. Public humiliation, character assassination, and the one thing Preston couldn't fight, the fear that maybe he truly didn't deserve the happiness he'd found. Tomorrow would determine whether love was strong enough to survive when the whole world seemed determined to destroy it. Preston was in the middle of reviewing Victor's financial records when the doorbell rang at 7 a.m. Through the security monitor, he saw two official-looking individuals with badges and clipboards. "Child Protective Services," the woman announced. When he opened the door, "We're here regarding concerns about the welfare of Harper Madison and Skylar Riley." Preston's blood turned to ice. "What concerns?" "Anonymous reports suggest an unstable living environment. We need to conduct an immediate welfare check." Behind them, Preston spotted a familiar black sedan. Victor's private investigator sat behind the wheel, photographing everything. Autumn appeared at the top of the staircase, still in her robe, face pale with terror. "What's happening?" "Ma'am, we need to speak with you and examine the children's living conditions," the male social worker said, stepping inside without invitation. The triplets emerged from their bedrooms, confused and frightened by the serious strangers invading their home. Harper clung to Preston's leg while Madison and Skylar pressed close to Autumn. "There have been allegations of inappropriate relationships, financial manipulation, and unstable parenting decisions," the female worker continued, making notes. "We need to assess whether this environment is suitable for minor children." Preston recognized the language. Victor's psychological evaluation repackaged as child welfare concerns. Every private moment, every sign of affection, every family dinner was now being twisted into evidence of impropriety. "This is ridiculous," Autumn said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "My daughters are loved, cared for, and thriving here. Ma'am, we understand this is difficult, but we have credible reports suggesting the children may be at risk due to your boyfriend's mental instability and the nature of your relationship." "He's not my boyfriend," Autumn snapped. "He's my fiancé, and he's been nothing but wonderful to my daughters. Nevertheless, until we complete our investigation, the children need to be placed in protective custody." The words hit like physical blows. Harper started crying. Madison grabbed Preston's hand with desperate strength. Skylar looked between the adults with the wide-eyed terror of a child who'd already lost too much. "You can't take them," Preston said, his voice deadly calm. "There's no evidence of harm or neglect. Sir, please don't interfere with our investigation. Any resistance will be noted in our report." Preston watched helplessly as his world collapsed. Victor had found the perfect weapon. Using the system meant to protect children to destroy the family Preston had finally learned to love. "Mommy," Harper wailed as the social workers moved toward them. "I don't want to go." "Daddy Preston, help us," Skylar cried, the name she'd started using recently cutting through Preston's heart like a blade. But there was nothing he could do. Any physical resistance would only prove Victor's claims about his instability. Any legal challenge would take days while the girls suffered in foster care. "It's okay, babies," Autumn whispered, kneeling to hug her daughters while tears streamed down her face. "It's just for a little while. Uncle Preston and I will fix this." Preston felt the same helpless rage he'd experienced watching Elena die, the horrible realization that all his wealth and power meant nothing when it truly mattered. As the social workers led the sobbing triplets away, one of them turned back to Preston. "Sir, you're legally prohibited from contacting the children during our investigation. Any violation will result in criminal charges." The front door closed with devastating finality. Preston and Autumn stood in the suddenly empty foyer listening to the echo of children's voices that had filled their home with life. "He did this," Preston said quietly. "Victor orchestrated this whole thing." Autumn was beyond words, staring at the art projects still scattered on the coffee table, the half-finished puzzle the girls had been working on, the 3 small backpacks lined up by the door for a school trip they'd never take. "How do we get them back?" she whispered. Preston's phone buzzed with a text from Victor. "Resign quietly, sign over your shares, and maybe this investigation concludes quickly. Fight me, and those children disappear into the system forever." For the first time since Elena's death, Preston Sullivan felt utterly, completely defeated. Victor had found the one threat that could bring him to his knees, the safety and happiness of 3 little girls who called him daddy and trusted him to protect them, and he'd failed them all. That night, Preston sat in his empty mansion, surrounded by silence that felt like death itself. Somewhere across the city, 3 terrified children were crying themselves to sleep in a stranger's home, wondering why the adults they loved had let bad people take them away. Preston had built an empire, conquered markets, defeated every business rival he'd ever faced. But against Victor Kane's ultimate weapon, the weaponization of child welfare against the innocent, he felt as powerless as a broken man standing in a cemetery with no idea how to fight back. Preston Sullivan had spent 3 sleepless nights pacing his empty mansion, but by Thursday morning, something had changed. The broken man was gone, replaced by the strategic predator who'd built a $12 billion empire. He called Marcus Chen, his private investigator, at dawn. "Marcus, I need everything on Victor Kane. Financial records, phone logs, meeting schedules, personal relationships. I don't care what it costs or how many people you need to hire. How deep do you want me to go?" "Deep enough to bury him." By noon, Preston had assembled a war room in his home office. 3 computer screens displayed financial data, communication, logs, and a timeline of Victor's actions over the past 6 months. What emerged was a pattern of calculated manipulation that made Preston's old corporate ruthlessness look like child's play. Marcus arrived with boxes of evidence. "Victor's been planning this takeover for months. Look at these phone records. Calls to board members, meetings with your competitors, payments to that social worker who initiated the CPS investigation." Preston studied the documents with laser focus. "He's been systematically undermining confidence in my leadership while positioning himself as the stable alternative. It gets worse. Victor's been shorting Sullivan Technologies stock through shell companies. He profits every time he damages your reputation. Show me everything." The evidence was damning. Victor had leaked confidential information to competitors, manipulated quarterly reports to make Preston's decisions look financially irresponsible, and even paid journalists to plant negative stories about Preston's mental instability. But the smoking gun was a recorded phone call between Victor and the CPS investigator, discussing how to expedite the removal process for maximum psychological impact. He weaponized child protection services for a corporate takeover. Preston said quietly, his voice carrying the cold fury that had once terrified Fortune 500 CEOs. Friday's emergency board meeting felt like a trial. Victor sat at the opposite end of the conference table, confident and composed, surrounded by allies who believed Preston was too emotionally compromised to lead. "Gentlemen, ladies," Victor began, "we're here because Preston Sullivan's personal crisis has become a corporate liability. His erratic decisions, public embarrassment, and obvious manipulation by opportunistic outsiders have damaged our company's reputation and stock price." Preston listened without expression, letting Victor hang himself with overconfidence. "I propose a vote of no confidence," Victor continued. "Preston should step down immediately for medical evaluation, while I assume interim leadership to stabilize operations." "Are you finished, Victor?" Preston asked calmly. "I believe the evidence speaks for itself." Preston smiled, the same predatory expression that had preceded every major acquisition of his career. "You're right. The evidence does speak for itself." He activated the wall screen, displaying financial records that made several board members gasp. "Victor Kane has been systematically embezzling company funds through shell corporations for 18 months, Preston announced. "He's shorted our stock while spreading false information to drive down prices, profiting from the instability he created." Victor's face went white. "That's impossible. Here are the bank transfers. Here are the communication logs showing coordination with our competitors. And here," Preston clicked to the next slide, "is a recorded conversation between Victor and a CPS investigator discussing how to fabricate child endangerment claims for maximum psychological impact on me." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Patricia Hayes studied the documents with growing horror. Victor used child protection services as a weapon in a corporate takeover. Preston continued, his voice gaining strength. 3 innocent children are sitting in foster care right now because this man wanted my job. "This is fabricated evidence," Victor protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I've already turned copies over to the FBI," Preston said calmly. "Financial fraud, stock manipulation, conspiracy, and abuse of government services. The charges should be filed by Monday." Thomas Crawford leaned forward. "Preston, this evidence is overwhelming. How did we miss this?" "Because Victor's good at what he does. He's been planning this for months, betting that grief would make me weak and careless." Preston's eyes fixed on Victor. He was wrong. Victor gathered his papers with shaking hands. "This isn't over, Preston." "Yes, it is," Preston replied. "Security will escort you out. Your company assets are frozen pending federal investigation. And Victor, those children you terrorized? I'm going to make sure every newspaper in Chicago knows exactly what you did to them." As Victor was led away, Preston felt the familiar satisfaction of a perfectly executed victory. But this time, it wasn't about market dominance or quarterly profits. It was about bringing 3 little girls home. The call came at 6 a.m. Monday morning. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Director Sarah Martinez from Child Protective Services. Based on new evidence that's come to light regarding false allegations, we're immediately returning Harper, Madison, and Schuyler, Riley to your custody." Preston's hands shook as he gripped the phone. "How soon?" "We can have them ready for pickup in 2 hours. Mr. Sullivan, I want to personally apologize. The manipulation of our system to harm these children is unconscionable." Preston found Autumn in the kitchen, staring at 3 empty cereal bowls she'd automatically set out from habit. When he told her the news, she collapsed into his arms, sobbing with relief so profound it seemed to come from her very soul. "They're coming home," he whispered against her hair. "Our girls are coming home." At the CPS office, Preston barely maintained his composure when he saw them. 3 small figures, huddled together on a bench, wearing the same clothes they'd been taken in 4 days ago. Harper's eyes were red from crying. Madison clutched a stuffed animal someone had given her. Skylar looked smaller, more fragile than he'd ever seen her. Daddy Preston. They launched themselves at him with desperate relief, small arms wrapping around him like they'd never let go. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry, I should have protected you better." "We knew you'd come get us," Harper said solemnly. "We told the nice lady that our daddy always keeps his promises." The drive home was quiet except for occasional sniffles and whispered reassurances. The triplets pressed close to Preston and Autumn in the back seat, as if physical distance might somehow separate them again. At the mansion, Preston carried all three girls over the threshold together, a tradition he improvised on the spot that made them giggle for the first time in days. "Are we safe now?" Madison asked quietly that evening as Preston tucked them into bed. "You're safe," he promised. "The bad man who tried to hurt our family is gone forever. I won't let anyone take you away again." "Promise," Skylar whispered. "I promise. You're my daughters now in every way that matters. Nothing will change that." That weekend, Preston made another decision that would have shocked his old business associates. He called a press conference, not about corporate strategy or acquisitions, but about family. Victor Kane used Child Protection Services as a weapon in a hostile takeover attempt, Preston announced to the gathered reporters. 3 innocent children were traumatized because a man wanted control of my company. That ends now. He looked directly into the cameras. I'm stepping down as CEO of Sullivan Technologies to focus on what really matters. Being a father and husband. Success isn't measured by quarterly profits. It's measured by the love you give and receive. 2 weeks later, the wedding took place in the mansion's garden. Not the elaborate society event Preston's wealth could have afforded, but something intimate and meaningful. Autumn wore a simple white dress that complemented her natural beauty. The triplets served as flower girls, scattering rose petals with solemn concentration. Judge Patricia Chen, Marcus's aunt and longtime family friend, officiated the ceremony. "Preston," Judge Chen said, "do you take Autumn as your wife, promising to love her daughters as your own and to honor Elena's memory by building a family filled with joy and purpose?" "I do," Preston said, his voice steady and sure. "Autumn, do you take Preston as your husband, trusting him with your heart and your daughter's future, and honoring Elena's love by choosing hope over fear?" "I do," Autumn whispered, tears streaming down her face. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the small gathering of friends and Janet Chen's team erupted in applause. But the moment that would be remembered forever came next. Madison stepped forward with the microphone flanked by her sisters. "Excuse me, everyone," she announced with 7-year-old confidence. "We want to say something important." The 3 girls beamed at the gathered adults. "Now we have the best family ever," Harper declared. "We have Daddy Preston here with us, and Aunt Elena watching from heaven, and Mommy who's all better, and each other." "That means we're extra lucky," Skylar added, making half the gathering reach for tissues. As the reception continued into the evening, Preston found himself in conversation with Dr. Martinez, who'd become a friend through Autumn's treatment. "You?" "No," she said, watching the triplets play with children from their school. "Elena would be proud of what you've built here." Preston smiled, thinking of his first wife's belief in signs and destiny. "She sent them to me. I'm sure of it." "How can you be so certain?" "Because she knew I'd need them as much as they'd need me. Elena always said love multiplies when it's shared." She was right. As the night wound down and the girls finally fell asleep, exhausted from celebration, Preston stood in his study looking at Elena's photograph. But for the first time, the sadness was tempered by gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered to the image, "for loving them, for protecting them, for leading me to them when I needed saving." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new adventures as a family. But tonight, Preston Sullivan finally understood what Elena had tried to teach him, years ago, that the greatest fortune isn't what you accumulate but what you're willing to give. 1 year later, the Sullivan family had settled into rhythms that would have seemed impossible to Preston just 3 years before. Saturday mornings meant pancakes he'd finally learned to make without burning, followed by family trips to the Elena Sullivan Foundation's new community center in Lincoln Park. The foundation had grown beyond Preston's wildest expectations. What started as a way to honor Elena's memory had become a lifeline for hundreds of families across the Midwest. Single mothers received medical support, children attended after-school programs, and families found resources they'd never known existed. "Daddy Preston, look," Madison called from the center's music room, where she was teaching a younger child how to play a simple melody on the piano. At 8 years old, all three girls had become natural mentors to newer families entering the program. "She's a natural teacher," Autumn observed, joining Preston in the doorway. At 6 months pregnant with their first child together, she glowed, with health and happiness that still took Preston's breath away. "Wonder where she gets that?" Preston smiled, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind, his hands resting on the gentle curve where their son or daughter was growing. Harper and Skylar burst through the hallway leading a group of children in an impromptu game of tag. The community center buzzed with the energy of families finding hope, resources, and most importantly, connection with others who understood their struggles. "Mr. Sullivan?" A quiet voice interrupted his thoughts. Preston turned to see David Martinez, a recent widower whose wife had died in a car accident 6 months ago, leaving him with 2 young sons. "David, how are you holding up?" "Better, thanks to the counseling group. But I wanted to ask, my boys keep asking about that playground you mentioned, the one where kids can play while parents attend support meetings." Preston smiled. "Construction starts next month. It'll have equipment for all ages, plus a memorial garden where families can plant flowers for loved ones they've lost." David's eyes filled with tears. Maria would have loved that. She always said playgrounds were where children learned to dream again. After David walked away, Autumn squeezed Preston's hand. "You know what Elena would say if she could see this?" "What?" "That you finally figured out what she was trying to teach you all along. That success isn't about what you build for yourself. It's about what you build for others." That evening, as Preston helped the girls with homework at their kitchen table, his phone rang. Janet Chen, now thriving as CEO of Sullivan Technologies. "Preston, I wanted to update you on the quarterly numbers. We're up 18%, and employee satisfaction is at an all-time high since we implemented the family-friendly policies." "That's wonderful, Janet. You've exceeded every expectation. Actually, I have a favor to ask. There's a tech entrepreneur in Denver, brilliant guy, but he's been making some questionable decisions since his wife died last year. Hostile takeovers, mass layoffs, the kind of stuff you used to, well, before you found your family." Preston understood immediately. "You want me to talk to him? His board is considering intervention. But maybe what he needs isn't a corporate consultant. Maybe he needs someone who's been where he is." After hanging up, Preston found himself looking around the kitchen, at homework scattered across the table, at Autumn humming while preparing bottles for the baby's arrival, at 3 girls who'd taught him that love could heal even the deepest wounds. "Autumn," he said quietly, "how would you feel about a trip to Denver? There's someone I think I might be able to help." She looked up from her planning notebook, understanding immediately. Another lost soul who needs to remember how to be human? Something like that. The girls would love a family adventure, and Preston? She moved closer, her hand resting on his chest. "Elena would be proud of the man you've become, using your gifts to heal instead of destroy." As Preston tucked the triplets into bed that night, Skylar asked her usual question. "Daddy Preston, tell us again how you found us." "I was lost," he said, sitting on the edge of Harper's bed while all 3 girls listened. "Very sad and very lost. But then 3 very special girls appeared at exactly the right moment and reminded me that love doesn't end. It just grows into something new. And now you help other sad people remember that too," Madison added sleepily. "That's right, sweetheart, because that's what families do. We take care of each other and then we help others learn to take care of each other too." As he turned off their light, Preston reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a broken man grieving alone, in a cemetery, to a father, husband, and beacon of hope for other families in crisis, Tomorrow he would fly to Denver to meet another grieving widower who'd lost his way. Someone who probably measured success in stock prices and market dominance, just as Preston once had. Someone who needed to learn that sometimes salvation comes in the smallest packages, with the biggest hearts, when you least expect it and most desperately need it. 3 years after finding love in a cemetery, Preston Sullivan stood in another graveyard, this time in Denver, watching a man who looked exactly like he once had, broken, alone, and drowning in grief. Michael Torres, CEO of Torres Innovations, knelt beside a fresh grave marker, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hands shaking as he placed white lilies on the stone. His wife Sophia had died 2 months ago in a climbing accident, leaving him with a 7-year-old daughter he barely knew how to parent, and a company he was systematically destroying through ruthless decisions born from pain. Preston approached, slowly, recognizing the dangerous emptiness in Michael's eyes, the same emptiness that had nearly consumed him before 3 little girls changed everything. "She must have been very special," Preston said gently, stopping a respectful distance away. Michael looked up, his face a mask of defensive anger. "Do I know you?" "Preston Sullivan. I lost my wife 3 years ago." Preston gestured toward Sophia's headstone. "I know that particular kind of pain." "Then you know there's nothing anyone can say to make it better." "You're right. Nothing makes it better, but some things make it bearable." Michael stood slowly, studying Preston with the wariness of a wounded animal. "Are you here to tell me about finding peace and moving on? Because I've heard it all." "No. I'm here because your daughter needs you. And right now, you're disappearing into your grief the same way I did." The mention of his daughter struck deep. Michael's composure cracked slightly. "Isabella is fine. She has nannies, tutors, everything she needs. Everything except a father who's present." "What do you know about my daughter?" Preston smiled sadly. "I know she's 7 years old and probably confused about why Daddy changed after Mommy died. I know she's trying to be brave while her world falls apart. And I know that right now, you see her pain as a reminder of your own loss instead of a reason to heal." Michael's hands clenched into fists. "You don't know anything about my situation. 3 years ago I was you, successful, wealthy, and completely dead inside. I was making terrible business decisions, pushing away everyone who cared about me, and honestly, I was waiting to die." "What changed?" Preston pulled out his phone, showing Michael a recent photo. 3 beaming 8-year-old girls with their arms around a pregnant Autumn, all of them laughing at something Preston had said behind the camera. "I found them, or they found me. 3 little girls who'd lost people they loved, just like Isabella has. They taught me that grief doesn't have to be the end of love, it can be the beginning of a different kind of love." Michael stared at the photo. "Your children?" "Not biologically, but in every way that matters, yes. Their mother was dying when I met them. I thought I was helping them, but they saved me." "How?" Preston sat on a nearby bench, and after a moment, Michael joined him. "They showed me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means loving what you had so much that you're willing to love again." "Sophia and I were supposed to have more children," Michael whispered. "She wanted a big family. Now Isabella will be alone. She doesn't have to be. There are families everywhere who need what you can give. Children who need father figures, single mothers who need support, communities that need leaders who understand loss." Preston stood up, extending his hand. "Michael, I'm going to give you my contact information, not because I want anything from you, but because 3 years ago, someone could have talked to me in this cemetery, and maybe I wouldn't have wasted so much time drowning in my pain." Michael took the card, reading it slowly. "Why are you really here?" "Because my wife Elena believed in signs, in people being placed in each other's paths for a reason. Maybe I'm supposed to tell you that love doesn't end with death. It just transforms into something that can heal the world." That evening, Preston called Autumn from his hotel room. "How are my girls?" "Missing their daddy terribly. Harper wants to know if you found another sad person to help." "Maybe. We'll see." "Preston, Autumn's voice was soft. Elena would be so proud of who you've become. Using your pain to heal others, that's exactly what she would have wanted. Preston smiled, looking out at the Denver skyline. I finally understand what she meant about success being measured by hearts you touch. Every family the foundation helps. Every person who finds hope again. That's Elena's legacy continuing. 6 months later, Michael Torres established the Sophia Torres Foundation for Grieving Families, partnering with Preston's organization to create a nationwide network of support. Isabella Torres became an honorary big sister to dozens of children who'd lost parents, teaching them that families could be rebuilt from love and choice rather than just biology. As Preston watched his own son take his first steps across the Foundation's new family center, surrounded by laughing children and healing families, he understood the magnificent truth Elena had tried to teach him years ago. Love multiplies. Grief transforms into compassion. And sometimes salvation comes in the smallest packages. Like 3 little girls in a cemetery who see a broken man and offer the 3 words that change everything. Can we help? The circle was complete. The healing would continue. And somewhere, Preston knew Elena was smiling, watching the endless ripples of love spread across a world that desperately needed to remember how to be human. Their love story hadn't ended with death. It had just begun to transform the world, one healed heart at a time.